Welcome to the GreenPilled.network podcast. If you're just joining us, we are building a coordination, a network society of thousands of hackers, dreamers, and doers using crypto to bring positive sum digital systems to the world. This podcast features the people who are doing it, and we publish a season every couple months. This season is Lean Mean Capital Allocation Machines. Capital allocation is the process of deciding how to spend or invest financial resources. With Web3, we can achieve not just financial returns with those financial resources, but achieve impact equals profit. We can build more scalable, precise, democratic, transparent, incorruptible, and global capital allocation machines. What are the coolest experiments? Who are the people who are doing it? That is the theme of this season of Greenpill. My guests today are Shaurya Dewey, Lillian Wang, and Carl Curvone. They are some of the community members and co-authors that are supporting the launch of a new book entitled Plurality, The Future of Collaborative Technology and Democracy. This book was written by Glenn Weil, Audrey Tang, and the Plurality community. Carl, Lillian, Shaurya are members of the Plurality community, and they are here today to talk about the book launch and to talk about some of the themes behind Plurality. So the book is available today on Amazon and plurality.net. So if you want to go ahead and open up a browser and open up plurality.net, that's where you can read the book online, learn about the plurality movement. And I think we're going to get into some of the high level concepts on this episode. So I think you're going to enjoy this episode. What's up, y'all? Great to have you on the show. Maybe we'll start off with a brief round of introductions, starting with you, Carl.
Hey, nice to see everyone here. I guess I'm a frequent contributor to the GreenPilled podcast. I'm one of the contributors to the Plurality book. I was very excited about it because I think that there's such a need to explore the whole design space around plurality, and there was an opportunity to bring data into that conversation. So I kind of reacted to one of Glenn's tweets and said I'd love to help out any way that I can. And next thing I know, he kind of put me in charge of helping with the data and some of the styling around all of the exhibits and the visualizations for the exhibits that were in the book. So I think it's a really important topic. I think that data is a very important component of how we think about issues that affect us and how we surface it and create narratives around that. And it was just a really exciting way of doing that out in the open with other contributors. My day job, I do kind of data and data visualization for a project called Open Source Observer.
Thanks, Carl. Lillian, you want to go next?
Yes, I'm a UI UX designer from Taiwan. I'm based in New Zealand currently. And I start to be involved in the plurality community since end of last year. So I met Tofu, which is another designer. Shout out to Tofu. He has been doing like a lot of like branding and like logo for basically logo you see everywhere. It's from him. And so I'm collab with him and also Glenn to work on the book cover, and also several graphics diagrams in the book. So I just find this whole idea of like plurality is like very interested because it's just a totally different way of thinking, and feel like it's a way of like collaboration that I've never thought before. And yeah, so I really think that it's very important for like digital identity for like as a citizen of Taiwan. Like we always see like there's some threat out there, and like we want to find our way to survive. And I think plurality might be an answer for it. And also our digital minister, who is also the part of the author, Audrey, and we all know like she's like very advocate on all of the like democracy of like collaboration things. So I'm just really excited to be part of it and see how I can contribute to the community.
Great. Last but not least.
Hi, my name is Shaurya. I lead the publicity and marketing work for the Plurality book. I learned about the book back when I worked at Microsoft. I actually found out about it through the platform that it's governed by called Git. Git, now called Git Rules, I believe, is the governance platform for the book. And so it's kind of being beta tested by developing the Plurality book itself. So it's the Plurality book is an application of what I would consider to be a plural technology in Git Rules. And similar to Carl, I saw a tweet from Glenn, thought the book was fantastic, got in touch, and I was put in charge of PR and marketing. And since then, We've put together a European tour, which is set to kick off in the next couple of days. We're hitting about 5 cities. I also led some of the work surrounding endorsement sourcing and then also publication coordination, a little bit of the website wording, and generally serving as an ambassador for the book. So we can explain what these concepts are, why they're relevant today, and trying to spread the word about Taiwan's journey in nurturing its democracy and Audrey Tang's work being super successful in that end.
Yeah, one thing just to plug actually is that Shaurya and Lillian and I, we've never actually met or spoken before. This is our first time doing that. And I think it's probably true for most people that work on this book, is that they only collaborated either kind of directly on Git or in the Discord chat. And so all this work was done basically with very little synchronous communication.
Yeah, it's interesting to see y'all pushing the boundaries of, I'm going to call it networked book writing or network movement stimulation here, and maybe plural movement stimulation here, since y'all have kind of very different backgrounds. I'd be curious to just tee us off with the question, what is plurality? And then that'll give us some more threads to pull from there. So what is plurality? And we'll go in reverse order of the introductions that we did. So go ahead, Shaurya.
It's a great question, one that comes up a lot. The best way that I've settled on describing it is something is plural to the extent that it enables collaboration across social difference. So something can be more plural relatively to something that is less plural. And what the book discusses is applications of plural technologies specifically. So a popular one that comes up is quadratic voting. That's something that's been integral to, I think, the Gitcoin community more broadly and whatnot. But generally, it is something that uses a network's diversity for growth rather than polarization or inequality, which is what previously diversity has been used for. So that's probably the best way. But to make it short and sweet, it is something that enables collaboration across social difference.
I guess it's my turn. And I totally agree with what Shaurya just described. And I think for me, that plurality is, like what I mentioned, is a new way of like thinking and collaboration, and probably is a third way that describing the book is like we're building this corridor of a narrow, I think it's called a narrow democracy of the corridor, that is like against the authoritarian and against with like probably just AI domination. And it's a way that only can be done by having multiple people, and like plurality also means like multiple people, like in Mandarin. So it's like only you have the willingness from a group of people and like to hear from everyone that can make this thing happen. Yeah. So like the technology, how to achieve that, and what is the background behind it, I think it's all like written in this plurality book. Yeah.
What I would add is that it probably wasn't something that I thought about very much until quite recently. It was something that I was affected by, but I didn't really give much mind space to the idea of plurality itself. And what I mean by that is that it's very easy to seek out echo chambers and to seek out, confirmation bias in people that have the same views as you. And it really takes deliberate effort to look for diversity in viewpoints, and actually to be able to build the muscle where you can hold different opposing or seemingly opposing viewpoints in your head at the same time, and actually try and reconcile some of the differences or perspectives. So I think like at the individual level, it's like the ability to have multiple perspectives and kind of put them on an even playing field. In like a group or society, it's actually kind of seeking out that like intellectual diversity and different viewpoints, and being, again, comfortable with that. And then like at the nation state level, or at the country level, it's recognizing that you need there to be opposing political views. You want to prevent there from being too much polarization, and that's kind of a necessary ingredient of having a liberal democracy.
Would love to talk about some tangible examples of plurality out there. I think it's one thing to talk about this in abstract, but I think that examples will help ground the listener of plurality in practice. And I'm wondering for each of you, what comes to mind when you think of a community that's doing this well? Obviously, Taiwan is an example. There's probably some examples in Web3, but what are your favorite examples of plurality in practice to ground the listener in a practical example? And whoever has an answer can go first on that one.
I can probably go first because Yeah, I am like I started involved with the Taiwan community, like the Taiwan DAO community, like from last year, and it's a very interesting group of people. So they start that group called Gov Zero. So it's a group of people that honestly anyone can join the group, and it's mostly for like any public goods related stuff. So if you say that you feel like you want to make our politicians like the income more transparent to people, you can say, yeah, I want to create a project and can probably somehow use some technology and to make this happen. Like we can I'm the person that hosts a group, and I want to enjoy anyone that have the ability or have the same also want to contribute to this idea to join. And then it's kind of like there are many small groups like this that want to achieve on different kinds of issues, like want to take on different kinds of issues and want to, or they feel like very passionate about of one topic. Then they can just like create, it's basically on Slack, so you can just create a Slack channel on this GovZero Slack workspace, and then anyone interested can just join it, and then you can like organize like some online meetup and things. And then there are like many groups of people have already achieved like building websites together, or like just holding like online offline events, and even just like a book club kind of things, and like trying to understand more about like Web3 or DAO, and like just like different ways of collaboration. And I think that's a very beautiful example of how plurality is.
Anyone else have an example? If not, I can move on to the next question. We don't have to have every guest answer every question, but if you have one, then please speak up.
I would say Polis is a great example of a plural technology. For those who don't know what Polis is, it's an open source platform where communities can share their opinions on a certain topic, and Polis will aggregate these opinions and then cluster them into different groups that represent shared ideals between certain groups of people. So where before the conversation was many individual nodes speaking to each other and technology didn't point out explicitly where people would agree. Now with Polis, you can take those same text inputs and highlight the agreement amongst what would be otherwise really diverse individuals. So it kind of brings us closer together, shows us where we agree and also ultimately where we differ. And it highlights where we agree more. So it's a more pro-social form of discourse that I think is really true to the nature of plural technologies more generally.
Carl, anything come to mind? If not, I can move on to the next question.
Yeah, let's move on. I think those are great examples.
Great. Why do you all think that this book is important right now? What is the moment that we're trying to meet by putting the plurality book out there?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one. I think that there's a couple things here that really resonate about the mission of the book. So number one, I think we feel that we're at an age where polarization on various axes is like really high, which is kind of surprising given that we have so much more information at our disposal. And we've somehow found a way to suppress the desire to kind of make sense and hold that information on different levels, and are actually using that to seek out information which confirms our biases or allows us to reinforce views or find other people that think the same thing as us. So we definitely have to rebuild the muscle of being able to appreciate diversity of viewpoints and kind of challenge some of our, animal instincts and desire to hold on to beliefs that feel good, but we, are losing out on that richness and diversity of thought. So I think like the time is very important. The part that I was particularly interested in was just how data plays a role in, making sense of the world around us and, bolstering or challenging different narratives. So we're at a time right now where you can take issues like climate change, you can take COVID, you can take healthcare costs, you can take education, you can take different policies. And there's enough data out there where anybody could basically find some statistics to reinforce certain views. And they can be very clever about how you show the data or put a caption on top of it. And so we're at a point right now where we've kind of gone from viewing data as like the truth to actually being much more skeptical of where the data is coming from and the motives behind sharing that particular source of data. So what I thought was important about the book is actually any data that we use, any exhibits that we include, the audience or the reader of that should be able to understand where this is coming from, and even have the ability of transforming the data to test different ideas, or to visualize it in different ways, or to give it their own caption. So there are a number of examples where we tried to take some exhibit that some other author had created and replicate it, and then ensure that anybody else who wanted to take their own spin had the source code and the ability to do that. I'd like to think that more projects can do that type of thing, where they kind of put the data out there. They encourage people to kick the tires on it and give it multiple interpretations. And so for this particular case study, I feel that in addition to having a plurality of ways of translating or interpreting or applying the book, the data that was backing up some of the assertions should have that same feature.
Thanks. Anyone else have something to add?
Yeah, I think that the plurality book is important today because there's this increasing sense that most folks have, regardless of tech literacy or academic background, but there's an understanding that technology is impactful. And if nobody's driving it, it will inevitably harm some portion of our culture and society in ways that we cannot control and can eventually reel in. And so you can see that in the ongoing discourse with things like AI regulation, or what are we going to do about TikTok in the United States? How are we going to regulate crypto moving forward, and election integrity conversation? So people understand that technology is consequential. The problem is that while we can agree that something needs to be done, we don't typically center the conversation around the right things. And mainly what I refer to is outdated governance models that don't work in the favor of the people that end up interacting with and are ultimately most affected by these technologies. So what the book has done is it gives a fresh perspective, and I think really intentional discourse about what are the changes that we need to make, and then how can we make them. And while it's not saying this is the only way to do it, it does do a great job of showing how Taiwan has accomplished this, and how Audrey Tang has been a pioneer in this space. And it discusses those learnings, and I think is a great starting point to have productive discourse about what do we do about these technologies.
Yeah, I think that's a really profound point that you made there, because if you look at how most people approach these things, they will maybe have the same root cause, and they might have the same end goal in mind. Like, obviously nobody wants AI to exterminate the human population. Like that's an outcome that everybody can agree is bad. And obviously, we now have the ability to, maybe it's a decade, maybe it's less than that, maybe it's longer, but to create AGI. So we can kind of agree on both of those things as being, the beginning and the end. But what we do in the middle is the important part to decide on. And so even just, creating a solution space where people are able to surface different plausible implementation approaches and ideas, and you can actually, use something like Polis or other tools to make sense of that and identify common ground. That is very different than just kind of, buckling down and viewing these people as a set that you have no common ground with, regardless of how you see the issue.
I'm curious what drew each of you to the book. We all have scarcity of our time and many things that we can work on. What drew you to the book, and why was it important to you to contribute to this book?
What drew me to the book in the very beginning was this notion that this is a living, breathing document that is open source, and I can be one of many people that contributes to it in some manner. So I came looking to get my hands dirty with open source. And once I arrived, I found much, much more meaning in the work that was being done. I think that the conversations that were being had are so important for today. And ultimately, as I got deeper into it, seeing more and more people join the Discord and raise their hands to volunteer and offer perspectives and engaging meaningfully with the project is, I think, ultimately really inspiring. And so that's what drew me to the project and what kept me around.
For me, it's also I'm just very intrigued by the idea of the open source book. And also it feels very rewarding when I receive those the points, even though I didn't know that what I can really do with those points at that moment. But then later, I think now, recently, we start to see oh, I can actually vote on the future of the book's next priorities, and I think it's kind of let me can imagine if this can work for a book, how possibly it can work for like other stuff or like even a network state kind of concept. So yeah, it just I'm just like I want to experiment this like really new thing that is happening. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I felt similarly. So, both Glenn and Audrey were big heroes of mine. I've heard them speak before. I've been very inspired by many of their ideas. I also think, like, specifically in the case of like governance, the idea that right now, like in the US, I'm guessing there aren't any serving politicians that have ever committed to a GitHub repo before. That, like, that section of the population is so underrepresented, despite the fact that technology has such an important impact on our lives, and even more so going forward. So even taking something which is less technical, like writing a book and doing copy editing, but being able to see the history of an idea, the history of a paragraph, how that's evolved, how that's been translated by different people. I think that's such an important way of thinking about law and the codes that we use to govern societies. Since learning more about it, I would actually kind of see what Audrey was doing on GitHub and what types of commits they were making. And a lot of it is like the type of stuff that I imagine civil servants and politicians are doing around the world, where they are kind of reviewing laws, they are translating things, they are clarifying things, and doing that work out in the open where like the entire society can see it and comment on it and engage. Just seems like a natural evolution for where democracy should go. So anyway, it seemed like a pretty irresistible call to adventure.
A call to adventure. I love that. This season of Greenpill podcast is all about capital allocation. Basically, the thought is we can now do capital allocation on chain. It's programmable. It's scalable. Are we going to build more precise, scalable, more democratic capital allocation mechanisms? And they'll also have all the benefits that blockchains have: transparency, immutability, globalness, programmability. And so I guess the question that's on the tip of my tongue is, what will plural capital allocation look like? It's one thing to build plural cultures and plural education, but how can we build more of a plurality of capital allocation? And Carl, since I think you're the one who's down the Web3 rabbit hole the furthest, I'll toss that over to you.
I mean, I think what's very interesting, I wish more people who are outside the space understood, is that on the one hand, what's happening in the crypto space is that you have financial experiments, you have economic experiments that are happening, but then you also have a lot of governance experiments that are happening. So new ideas, new ways of arriving at consensus, new ways of kind of determining the boundaries of a community and who has a say over decisions that affect that community. So all these experiments are happening. They're happening at like a really, really fast scale, because traditionally making money or getting a large group to vote on something was really just the type of thing that a nation state could do, unless you're playing, big, massive multiplayer online games. You didn't really have that kind of capability to do kind of, real world building and experimentation in that way. So the fact that this is happening, and the fact that you can basically say, all right, like here's a governance decision, and we're going to put a bit of money behind this. We're going to give this group of people capital that they can allocate. They can basically place bets on different types of outcomes or different solutions to the same problem. You now have the ability to kind of look back and say, okay, like, did that work? Did we produce a better outcome? So the combination of having like, the capability of having a financial layer and then this governance layer, and then there being a lot of experimentation that is happening, this feels extremely unique. So what I'd like to see is nation states, maybe it begins with Taiwan, maybe others, take a page from their book and do this, where they say, okay, we are going to take some aspect of our budget. We're going to give the community some tools for deciding what they care about and what types of things they want to see. And then they can actually allocate some of this funding. And we can be adults and come back 6 months later, a year later, whatever the period is, and have discussion about what worked and what didn't, and hopefully move some of the things that worked forward. So that kind of hands-on governance with real money behind it seems like something that we should be trying more of. And so I'm glad that Taiwan is doing that. I'd like there to be more experiments. I think there's a lot of inspiration that people can draw from the crypto space. And for young people, this is like exactly the type of kind of hands-on governance that I think we should entrust them to participate in.
I don't know if anyone else wants to take a swing at this. I feel like we're the Web3 nerds on the call. So if not, it's fine.
I'd echo what Carl said for the most part. But when you talk about new or novel capital allocation, there's there's a host of things that need to be done to make that operate at scale, right? So we need, like Carl said, an identity system, a governance system. We need public knowledge and understanding and appreciating what the capital allocation mechanism is. So I think the Plurality book is a great place to get started with that stuff. It'll give you good context. It'll give you pros and cons of different approaches used in the past. It'll teach you about Taiwan's journey in this. And ultimately, it'll inform the public about the notion that there are other options and that your voice can be integrated into decisions that are consequential for you and your future generations.
Yeah, my addition to sort of this, to step out of the host seat and answer my own question for a sec, is that I'm excited about the plurality of capital allocation mechanisms that could proliferate on chain. And I think that like that plurality is a feature because it creates anti-fragility, as opposed to having like one grant giving mechanism or having some bureaucratic process where only the lobbyists or the elites can actually get money. What if we could build more on-chain mechanisms to distribute money for public goods into the commons, to the plurality of people out there using a plurality of capital allocation mechanisms? And I think we're already starting to see this in Ethereum with all these grants programs run by all these different projects. And then you have quadratic funding and retroactive public goods funding and conviction voting and dedicated domain allocation. So it's an ecology of capital allocation. I think it's very plural at its base. So Carl, I don't know if you have any reaction to that. If not, we can move on.
No, I mean, I plus one everything that you said. Connecting it to something that Lillian said earlier. So one of the things that the book did to coordinate contributions was it used Git Rules, which has this kind of built-in, it's like a point system basically, where you can look at a contribution and you can award points to the contributor who made that based on the value, the uniqueness, whatever metric you care about. And so I think that, like, especially for something which was global and there wasn't much face time between the contributors, it introduced a pretty interesting dynamic. I don't think any of us were motivated because we wanted to get these like Git Rules points. That had nothing to do with it. It kind of tapped into our intrinsic motivation. But on the other hand, there is the idea that you need to decide which contributions are going to be accepted. You need to build reputation over time. And so this is a really interesting way of layering that in a way where it wasn't about that, but that was like a nice feature and allowed you kind of at the end of the book to look back and say, wow, like here's all the people that contributed. Here's different things that they did. Here's how active they were. And now here's this way of kind of looking at a high level how we might try to parse and value those different contributions. I don't know, Lillian, you kind of brought that up. Is there anything else you'd like to add based on your experience with Git Rules?
Yeah, I actually haven't participated in the voting, but I already like looked through like some like projects that are like proposals, and like it can be just as simple as like, oh, should we have a diagram for a certain paragraph and that kind of thing, and even that can be determined by people, and I think that's really cool.
Git Rules is awesome. I think it's a great way to prioritize issues and then reward folks for taking care of them and ultimately then deciding on what gets plugged into the book. And you can apply that issue prioritization and pull request approval model to a lot of open source projects. And, Git Rules has some ways to go. But the way I see this working out in the longer run is as more people engage with the platform, they gain credibility and they further the book's alignment to the communities that it's intended to serve. So it's this self-reinforcing engine where you can join, you can contribute, you can be credited, and you can, in the process, make the book more aligned to yourself. And the incentives are such that you will be credited more if your contributions align more with the community, or in other words, facilitating collaboration across social difference. So it's a metaphor for itself, and I think it really works out in the community's favor.
I'm also quite keen to see like how, because currently it's just Glenn that is assigned the point, and I'm just quite keen to see like how it will evolve in the future if there will be more people that can also do that.
Yeah, like my own experience would be that there are very few issues where I had a strong opinion on. I was quite happy to, view Glenn and Audrey as benevolent dictators that had a vision for this, and I was very happy to contribute. But there are a few things that I care a lot about, actually. So when it came to just like the data and the figures, I felt that it was really important that any data that was there, you could trace the original source. Like, where did this data come from? Is it a public source, or is it something where anybody else could go in and like kick the tires and say, actually, you missed something here, or there's an update and now you need to capture this. So that was an area where I felt quite strongly. Just the idea of having these votes or these voting rights doesn't mean that you're going to exercise it on every issue. There can be many issues where you're just quite happy to delegate to others who are more knowledgeable in it. But the fact that you have this and you're able to use that as you see fit allows you to engage where you need to, but at the same time feel that you're kind of confident that the group is making a good choice because you can see what they're doing and you don't feel the need to exercise your voice in every vote.
Last question before we wrap. If the Plurality book is massively successful, if the plurality movement is maximally successful, how does the world change in 10 years? So take us forward to 2035 and tell us about the plurality movement and how it's changed the world.
Yeah, so a couple things are running through my head right now. I think number one, I would like to see very tactically a lot of translations. So there's a large translator team not represented here, but I'd love to see there be 50 versions in different languages that are circulating. Number two, I'd actually like to see more departments, ministries within governments actually experiment with this type of thing. Literally what that means is there are people on their teams that are spinning up a repo and committing code into that repo. And it can be anything from a draft regulation, anything else that they might want to put there. The third thing I'd like to see is actually that some of these tools start being used to allocate meaningful amounts of money. So like the example that we gave, you could actually have quadratic funding, or you could have some funding mechanism where the community is giving input into the types of things that they want built or solutions to problems. And they also have a say, they have votes in how that funding is going to get allocated. Those types of experiments in liquid democracy. Those are all three things I'd like to see. I'd actually like to see them in 5 years, not 15 years. I think big vision 15 years from now is that we kind of maxed out this phase of civilization where we are very, very polarized. We're not able to hold multiple ideas in our head at one time, and we actually go in the other direction towards more plurality.
I would say that in the future, if plurality is maximally successful, we would have interoperable, decentralized identity systems. We would have a public that appreciates the value of their data and is able to custody it without the threat of having it compromised. We would have bottoms-up governance models, and similar to what Carl said, meaningful amounts of capital that are allocated through these funding mechanisms. There's an audience of governments that are looking to update and digitize their infrastructures. And so there's a lot of theories about, how network states might develop and the role of democracies in the future. I feel that if it's done in a way that's beneficial for everybody, it would likely mirror what plurality promises. So it would something like India Stack, which is a very ambitious project that leverages the Aadhaar technology to unify India. It would probably align itself with a more plural implementation of its own tech. So that would be maybe a very tactical way to look at the future and what plurality can offer for it.
I would think that maybe just starting from a workplace will be different. Instead of just someone making maybe the CEO is making some single decision, there will be possibly that everyone can also be involved somehow with the decision making process, and even the salary, how to distribute your salary can be different. Even for a policy that is everyone can just open their app and participating and voting for a decision for the country or for the organization that they belong to, and then make impact.
All right. I lied. That wasn't the last question. Last question. Is there anything I didn't ask that you want to say? Carl, we'll go to you first again.
I think we covered everything. This was a lot of fun.
If you're interested in the Plurality book, it is open source. You can fork its contents. You can use it in any way you'd like. You are absolutely welcome to join the Discord, earn credits, and participate in the development of the project. So please come by.
And we definitely need more designers because from what I see from the pipeline, there are already a lot of things that will probably happening. So yeah, join us on Discord.
Yeah, I lied too. I think if you like the book, the best compliment you can do is to fork it.
There you go. I love that. All right. Well, the call to action for the listener, I think, is to go to plurality.net and to check out the book, which launches this week. And thanks, y'all, for coming on the Greenpill podcast. Enjoyed the conversation and excited for the future of plurality.
Thank you.
See you guys. Thanks, Kevin.
All right. We just heard from Shaurya, Lillian, and Carl of the plurality community about. I'm excited about them because I think that this community and Audrey and Glenn are doing really good work to push democracy into the 21st century. And I think that the concept of plurality is really very beautiful, aesthetic, but also in terms of the ideas. And I think it's one of the powerful movements and ideas for the 21st century. And I can't wait to see what plural capital allocation looks like. Thanks for listening to the GreenPilled.network podcast. This podcast features the people who are building a coordination, a network society of thousands of hackers, dreamers, and doers using crypto to bring positive sum systems to the world, like Carl, like Lillian, like Shaurya, like the plurality community. If you value our work, you can go to pods.media and find all episodes and start collecting. Thank you to yes2crypto.eth, MMAonchain.eth, and Zero Knowledge.eth for being recent collectors of Greenpill podcast episodes. While you're here, you may also want to make an offering to our algorithmic overlords. Please subscribe, rate, and review. Tell your friends about Greenpill. It really helps us build the regenerative crypto economics movement. I will see you next time. Peace and love.